So much more work to do what they would have done in the 50s today. The modern age. But first, some background.
Gummy bear rocket in 3, 2, 1. Gummy bears worked!
This is a show called Mythbusters. Each episode would test a different popular myth and work to find out if it was confirmed, plausible, or, like the name of the show suggests, busted. I grew up on this show, and I loved watching it, and was really sad when it was cancelled, until I found out that one of the hosts of the show, MSIII, was launching his own YouTube channel where he would do kind of whatever, sometimes including recreating classic movie props in his workshop. The idea of this always fascinated me. The idea of reverse engineering a prop to find out how it was made and to create it with your own hands, to have your own customized version of it. Alas, I didn't have a workshop or the skills to use one even if I did, but then I realized I have a computer and I have skills with photoshopping. So today, inspired by the work of MSIII and the amazing Back to the Future trilogy, I'm going to try to replicate the Back to the Future clock tower newspaper. Will I be able to? I have no idea. But the first step is to find a good reference image. Luckily, I was able to find this high-quality picture to work off. Since I didn't have the original picture of the clock tower that they used, I just had to do my best to work with a low-quality version that will have to look old. Luckily, it's an old paper, and the camera quality wasn't that great, so it looks okay in my opinion. After some color correction, I moved on to creating the basic layout of different lines and columns to create a sense of structure for the paper. Oh, and if you're wondering, I found a picture version of the Hill Valley Telegraph logo, and I used that instead of trying to replicate it with type. It just seemed easier and more accurate. Win-win. Then it was time for text. I went from the top of the page to the bottom of the page to give myself a sense of a progress bar. The closer to the bottom of the page I was, the further along I was. I started with the text in the header. It was about then that I realized that because this paper was made in the 50s, canonically, it wouldn't have been written with a font that had equidistant spacing. It would have been made with a press that had individual letter tiles. You put all the tiles in a form, and then you put the paper and ink on top of that to create the paper. Which means that the letters in each word have different spacing. It's not uniform like a font is. So I, because I was using a font, had to go and change the individual spacing between each letter to match the reference image. So much more work to do what they would have done in the 50s today. The modern age. I should mention that I wasn't able to find any of the actual assets they used for this, the fonts, the images, etc. So I just had to do my best to replicate them while guessing. It's not going to be perfectly accurate, but I'm hoping for at least close enough that when you look at it at first glance, it looks close enough. I was curious when I saw the 10-cent price tag. A newspaper now costs anywhere from $1.50 to $5. Now granted, inflation is part of that, but wow, times have changed. I'll talk about this more later, but even though this was a custom prop for Back to the Future, the body of the newspaper was the same stock paper that they use for every movie ever. So it was basically just the same 3 to 4 paragraphs repeated over and over and over again, which made it easier for the prep people because no one was going to be looking at it and it was less typing to do, but it also made it easier for me, who was already typing a lot. The picture I was using wasn't a digital file, it was a picture of an actual paper, meaning that the paper was slightly warped in places, and so in addition to having the variance of a press design instead of a digital design, I also had to account for differences in perspective of the image, or places where the paper had bent slightly, and so if I was going to create a paper that looked how the actual prop looked, it had to deviate from the reference image. Now, how exactly am I going to figure out how close this is to the original? Right, there's one more thing I have to tell you. See, I talked to you earlier about MSIII's YouTube channel. Well, a little while ago, he started making videos at the Earl Press. Now, Earl is a company that makes a lot of movie props. The Back to the Future newspaper, as well as countless other iconic film props, as well as other filler props like magazines and packaging labels that you never look at, but they're always there. And while MSIII was learning all about how to make these, he mentioned that the Earl Press was selling some of these props in their store. So of course I spent $60 on a replica prop made by the same people and the same way that they made the actual prop for the movie in 1985. Let's take a look. It's in a very thin box, which I mean makes sense. It's paper, but for some reason I was expecting it to be wider. Yeah, this feels like an actual newspaper. This is amazing. Well, here we are. My recreation of the Back to the Future newspaper prop. A few things. First of all, it's made out of cardstock instead of actual newspaper paper. They print this the way that newspapers are printed. This is printed like it's an actual newspaper. Also, it's just the first page above the fold instead of an actual newspaper. Got the above the fold clock tower. Even this has become a little bit noteworthy. But there's this whole back thing. The weather forecast, marriage licenses, in memoriam for John Geis, I think. I've heard people talk about how a lot of these names and pictures of people that work there, people that work at Earl Hayes, just putting their friends or themselves in here. Be interested to see what all these, because there are a lot of names here. So none of this is anything with Hill Valley or Back to the Future at all. This is a generic newspaper. It's multiple pages too. I kind of assumed it was just kind of a single page. But okay, no, it is multiple pages, but all the inside pages are exactly the same. But let's talk design for a second. First of all, this physical copy, I only have a printer that can do 8.5 by 11. This is 11 by 14. And so I have to print it on 2 different sheets of paper and tape it, which the margin bothers me, but also this tape is, it's just a little bit unwieldy. Not quite as good as an actual newspaper, but let's move on to design. Yesterday's temperature range, 80 to 64, details page C3. Something tells me there's not. This front page here has a paragraph that starts with of no less importance, the fact regarding, thus at this conference, of no less importance, a suggestion to the public, the facts regarding. So it's a lot of the same thing over and over again. And then this new headline, plans to launch tests of new tall system here, is the same copy in the thing, because of course you're not going to be looking at it. The first thing I would say is that the spacing between letters, I pointed out that I did that on purpose to match the image, but this doesn't feel like printing press differences. This feels like someone went in and changed the spacing. It feels spread out instead of variable. It feels like someone just hit the keys on the computer to space the letters apart, and it doesn't feel natural. It feels artificial. And part of that might be the fact that, I mean, I am trying to recreate one specific newspaper. The videos at Earl Hayes actually talk about how individual props are going to look different when you're working with a handmade thing, and that's better than trying to replicate the hero prop the exact same way every time. And this is just the hero prop recreated. It looks pretty close. I don't like the font I'm using for the headlines. I mean, I use Times New Roman for the body, and that looks pretty good. It at least looks close enough. The other fonts, the sans serif fonts, don't look great. The Clock Tower Struck by Lightning, Start at 10:04, Plans to Launch. It looks too modern, probably because it is. I use Helvetica, and I don't really name the other one. But these are modern fonts, and I don't know exactly what they used, but I don't think it was this. And the thing is, it looks completely ordinary. Like, yes, I know it's iconic, but it doesn't look like a movie prop. I mean, yeah, if you look at the details, you can see they repeated things, but it looks like it just belongs. There's value in doing things accurately like this. It makes me want to buy more film props, which is not a great thing. It makes me want to make more props. It makes me want to research things and recreate things. Overall, this was a very fun experiment, but I am not nearly at the level of Earl Hayes, obviously. The people that make props for the movies put a lot of work into them, and a lot of times in this stuff you'll never notice. I mean, yeah, you notice this newspaper, but how many milk cartons or magazines in supermarkets or business cards have you not looked at? Because of course it's there, but it was there because somebody made it. It's really cool, all the different stuff they can do, and yes, you can buy some of it, but there's a lot that's only existing on the screen. So the next time you watch a movie and you see somebody drink orange juice, read a letter, or a newspaper, take a closer look, because you may notice some repeating text over and over again, and you also may notice a lot of hard work that might make the movie even more enjoyable to watch. See ya.